Hello world, welcome to our podcast, Miami Business Lawyer. My name is Anna Tompovsky and I'm a business attorney here in Miami. And today in our studio we have a guest, Kendra Jones, who is our Global Compliance and Regulatory Specialist. The topic for today is quite interesting. It's a hot topic these days, data privacy, data collection, and the new regulatory framework that our government is taking. So without further ado, Kendra, please introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Kendra Jones. As Anna said, I'm a global regulatory and compliance specialist. Right now I work in the financial crime space. And again, as technology is advancing, as social media is growing and booming, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, these issues about data privacy are becoming more and more relevant, even in the work that I do. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Wonderful. So let's talk about what data privacy is. And why is it so important? As we now know, a lot of apps and social media apps collect a lot of their user data. What they do with that data is usually prescribed in their privacy policy. And every internet-based business actually supposed to have a privacy policy, which is a requirement for a lot of social media apps, such as Meta, such as Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and so on. In order for those apps to sort of qualify in terms of working on those platforms or advertising their services. In privacy policy, you would normally have several sections that talk about whether or not app collects data, what they do with that data, what they track, what they don't track, and so on. So it's quite a mouthful, but this is a very important document because you can evaluate amount of stuff that's being taken from you as a user. Now, there have been many instances at this point that apps have done with the data as they wished without really asking for the user permission, but it seems like those days are somewhat in the past.
Definitely. I would say they're definitely in the past, especially
Yes.
as additional states are coming up with their own versions. And this is why you really do need to get an expert in there, especially depending on what state you're in. It can be a different, type of laws or a different type of things mandating what you're able to do, what kind of permission you need. And there are, I think, 6 states here in the US that have additional privacy restrictions in addition to the GDPR, which is in Europe. And there are so many different privacy laws, so you really need to get an expert to know what it is that you need to be complying with in your local laws.
Correct. And we have a college student in the studio who had informed me today that some of the Florida colleges are now restricting access to certain apps like TikTok, like VK, which is a Russian app, and so also a social media app. And they're already doing their own sort of work in terms of restricting students' access to those apps. Now, Kendra, what do you think? How broad these restrictions are? And how, founded is the fear that sort of is underlying those restrictions?
I mean, I think it's well-founded. Even not so many years ago, we've seen a lot of data leaks come out. Even currently, there's a data leak that's been in the news. So I think it's super important to know what it is about data privacy, data protection, specifically the collection of the data, the use of the data, making sure you have the appropriate permissions, and you are specific about what to do if you go out of business. How are you going to get rid of my data? Or where are you going to dump it? Are you going to clear all of these things out of your system? How are you going to get rid of it? So yeah, I think it's super important. And even with AI, that's a big topic as well. So, are you going to dump my data into AI? Is that going to be training the AI? You know what I'm saying? Like, we need to know what's going on with our data.
Very good
it's super
point.
important.
Very good point.
Yeah.
And that's quite scary if you think about it. There is going to be AI sort of tracing everything that you do, everything that you like, your browsing history, your location, because this is what your iPhone would do in the I don't know. There used to be a show that was called something like Social Networking or something like that. It was sort of like a spin-off on a Facebook type of thing, where in one episode they were saying, look, our phone is listening to us and tracing our conversations, and they were in some game, right? They're like participating, playing a game, and then somebody says, oh, it's time to go on vacation. All of a sudden, in that game, all those advertisements for like Carnival Cruise appears, and then somebody says, oh, I'm hungry, and all of a sudden advertisement for like Domino's Pizza or something like that appears, and everyone's like, oh my god, our phone's still listening. It's like, are you sure?
It's real. It's real. Think about how many times you've gone to Google something random, and the next thing you know, it's showing up in your Instagram browser as an ad. Like, you know what I'm saying? In your feed as an ad. Like, this is become normalized, and I think it's really good that people are being forced to be more transparent about how they're using our data.
Yeah, we're starting to ask a lot of questions. Yeah. You know, how far are we exposed in terms of our daily life, and you know, where our privacy has gone to, right? Yeah, what are our privacy expectations? A lot of people say, don't say something on the phone because, you know, whatever, the government's going to listen, or the big brother's listening. And at first it was like, it's sort of like a Cold War type of mentality, but, you know, Snowden back in the day already told us this is actually happening. Yeah. We now know to sort of not have a lot of expectations in the privacy. I've done some specifically data privacy work as well, but I've worked in different jurisdictions, and I worked in China as well. I will say that in one particular jurisdiction where we work, the privacy restriction that was regulated by their local government was so high that no data that would identify a particular person who either worked or resided in that area could have been taken out of the jurisdiction, and the fines were quite huge for the company to do so.
Not even out of the country, and there are a few data privacy countries that are like that are so strict. I know Brazil is also one. There's just a bunch of them that require additional heightened scrutiny around their data privacy and, you know, really protecting their citizens.
Correct, and it seems like United States now is moving to have something of a global sort of federal act they're coming up with, and it's called the Restrict Act. Specifically created to ban apps that are owned by individuals or companies that reside or have, I don't know. We don't know very well yet how they define whether or not the app is owned by a company that's located in a non-friendly nation. What is a non-friendly nation? So far they've identified 5 of them. I believe it's China, North Korea, Iran, Russia, and can't remember the 5th one, but
man, that overlaps a lot, I think, with nations that are on the sanctions list. So I think that is probably going to be like the baseline of you know what they're.
And it sounds like the list could be growing.
It could be growing, yeah.
So a lot of it has to be, it's not a law yet, but it's something that the government's thinking about. Actually, it's an act supported by the Biden administration. We don't know how far it's going to go. But there are a lot of things in that act that sort of are quite broad and not very well defined yet. So we'll see if there's going to be more work done on that. But we'll see we're seeing the trend right now where when the government wants to restrict certain areas, and especially areas that have been dominated by the companies located overseas. Now, the Restrict Act specifically, as a lot of users say, have in mind TikTok. TikTok has been a hot topic for many years. It used to be a Musical.ly app that was very popular between kids, where they would create dances with with certain music. But now it became a a social network that's a huge phenomenon where people get very popular quite quickly. A lot of people have their businesses on TikTok that are making good money and provide, someone's livelihood is on TikTok.
Definitely.
And they really depend on that platform. And it's not just Chinese individuals or young college kids. It's people that have their businesses that, have their PR marketing campaigns that actually sell stuff on the internet that are highly dependent on TikTok.
Definitely.
For their livelihood, which is why there is a bit of, pushback from the community saying, well, just because TikTok is an app that's owned by a Chinese company or a Chinese individual, that doesn't mean that you have to necessarily restrict or close it down. And then TikTok, I think, is coming up with a solution for this, which sounds like a good solution to me. Somebody who's done, data privacy investigations, whatnot, they're saying, we're going to have this project, which is, I think, called Project Texas, where we're going to collaborate with Oracle and we're going to store U.S. User data here in the United States, in Texas, which is why it's called Project Texas. And it's going to be monitored by Oracle, which is a U.S. company.
Yeah. So just to back up a little bit, so the data privacy concern here with TikTok and with having companies owned by unfriendly nations is that they can be accessing data of the users here in the U.S.
Okay.
So, for instance, as China has sort of taken on some countries have moved in a more authoritarian direction, for instance, and they're requiring these companies to essentially turn over whatever they want whenever they want it. And that doesn't necessarily comply with whatever different individual countries may want and the privacy laws that they have instituted for their citizens. So essentially, by logging in onto some of these apps, like a TikTok, for instance, you perhaps are opening yourself up to having your information being turned over to the Chinese government, which is fine for most of us because they're not going to want us anyways. But but for journalists, for people who do, highly controversial type of journalism and any sort of work around that, it can present a real problem and potentially even a safety issue. So I think that's more of the crux of the issue and why they're trying to come up with all of these solutions around the Restrict Act and Project Texas to store the data here as opposed to storing it in China. And we're going to see if that works. It doesn't seem like that's going to work. I don't think that's going to be satisfactory right now. And there's also a push towards divesting TikTok and actually forcing a sale of TikTok from a Chinese held company to an American company, and I'm not sure that that's going to work either, Charles.
Well, it sounds it actually sounds like a taking, which is in investment arbitration terms is when an investor then should go ahead and sue the country because. Imagine you create a very successful business, it grows, it becomes a global business, you're doing very well, you put in a lot of work and your effort in this, and all of a sudden, she's like, we don't really like it that you're from the United States. Because we think that, in the United States, apps are not very well regulated in terms of their data storage and collection.
Sure.
So I think you should sell your app, and that's it. We don't want things like this to be done to our companies as well. Right?
And I think that's a part of the bigger global issue. Yeah. It's like whatever you do to TikTok is going to set the precedent for what's to come and what is actually allowed into other countries.
Exactly.
And then again, it's not just maybe US and China, there's other countries involved here too where TikTok doesn't rise to the level of their data privacy either. And it has been restricted in some countries as well, so already. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting,
very interesting
story to watch.
But I think, somewhat of a balancing act here as well. And I think it would be important to note that if what we do to other apps is going to be done to our apps at the very least. So let's balance it out to the point that Perhaps there is a requirement that if you collect data from, U.S. residents and U.S. citizens, customers located in the United States, you have to store that data in the United States. And that there has to be a data order very similar to GDPR, which is the UK Data Privacy Act, that requires that there is an officer that reviews the data, where it goes, is responsible for the data, can answer customers' questions about what's happening to the data, yada, yada, yada. So we need something like that here, and perhaps we need further restrictions in terms of data usage. But I don't think that this is wise to pick on certain companies, pick on certain apps, because we call China not a friendly nation. Today with the new administration, China's going to become a friendly nation.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen to that? So listen, I think it's just very broad. I think that us being more equal in terms of regulatory distribution on all of the apps, domestic and international, to me seems a better balancing act.
Yeah.
But there has to be more restrictions and more control as to where data is going, what's done with data, and with that, certain steps should be taken, like fines, like if there are multiple regulatory violations, and perhaps divestment, of ownership.
And so this is what we want to focus on as we're, working together, is helping people navigate all of these issues as they're building their business, especially for tech companies. As you're building businesses, making sure that you have the right privacy policy, both internal and external for your customers. Your internal data privacy concerns around how you're storing data, where you're storing data, and taking all of those things into consideration as you're building your company, so that you do it on the front end, so you don't have to worry about this stuff on the back end. And then we're going to keep up with those laws as things evolve, and keep you abreast of anything that you may need to make changes around. And that's what we're doing, and that's what we're here, and that's what we're the experts in doing.
Exactly. And thank you, Kendra, for bringing this up. This is a big part of our job, and I also wanted to mention this case that came up a few months ago about a foreign crypto platform, Bislato, which was a Hong Kong platform. But the owner, who's a Russian citizen, was temporarily residing in Miami, Florida. That was sort of a big news. I don't know.
A surprise to absolutely no one.
A surprise to absolutely no one, yes. But then, a surprise was that there was, at least from what we can see from DOJ documents and their reasons for an arrest of the owner of Bislato and all those various allegations of violations that I'm sure the owner had no idea about, thinking that he's the owner of a foreign company that doesn't really work with U.S. customers, at least had it in their in their policy. They're not accepting U.S.-based customers in their platform. All of a sudden gets arrested by the Department of Justice, right, and gets put in jail, actually, the thing of it is there seems to be an absolute lack of legal strategy in building a business like that and operating a business like that, because if you state in your privacy policy you don't collect or you don't allow customers from the United States to be there, and then you go and check and you see the traffic of the U.S. customers coming into your platform, while you're basically sort of exposing yourself. And then you are already in hot waters with that business, such as crypto platforms that are going to be regulated more and more by the government.
Absolutely. And like you said, this is going to challenge the tech world, move fast and break things sort of mantra. There's going to be more restrictions around these issues. So you need to turn to legal experts that can actually sit with you, come up with a strategy that is a workable strategy that you can implement, and you can have your employees accountable to this policy as well. Because at the end of the day, the regulatory framework is going to be narrowing more and more. And there are going to be, as I've said, fines, and the fines are going to be huge. It's not like a $300 fine. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars in fines. Per violation in some situations.
Yes.
So this could be a situation where you have every single persons whose data you stored incorrectly could be a separate violation, you know? So the rules are still evolving in this space, and like Anna said, you definitely will need someone to develop a comprehensive strategy for you, and that's what we're good at.
Exactly. With that, I'd like to say that we are very grateful for our listeners today. If you like this podcast, please like us on Instagram, on YouTube, and on other platforms. We would really appreciate that. And if you have any questions, please reach out directly. The Instagram account is Miami _business_lawyer. We are here for you. We would love to hear any comments, any sort of questions, or maybe recommendations for future topics pertaining to crossroads of compliance and tech and global businesses. And this is our area of interest, and we are happily concluding our podcast on that note.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.